might be able to give him an innocuous explanation of Mary's nighttime stroll, and to reassure him that his best friend's widow had been and was still faithful to her husband. Nonetheless, he resisted the urge, because he was angry with Tessa. Why was she showing such a determined lack of interest in his forthcoming candidacy for the council? Did she not realize how tight a stranglehold his anxiety had gained over him ever since he'd sent in his application form? Even though he had expected to feel this way, the pain was not diminished by anticipation, any more than being hit by a train would be less devastating for seeing it approaching down the track. Colin merely suffered twice, in the expectation and in its realization. His nightmarish new fantasies swirled around the Mollisons and the way in which they were likely to attack him. Counter-arguments, explanations, and extenuations ran constantly through his mind. He saw himself already besieged, fighting for his reputation. The edge of paranoia, always apparent in Colin's dealings with the world, was becoming more pronounced, and meanwhile Tessa was pretending to be oblivious, doing absolutely nothing to help alleviate the dreadful, crushing strain. He knew that she did not think he ought to be standing. Perhaps she too was terrified that Howard Mollison would slit open the bulging gut of their past and spill its ghastly secrets for all the Pagford vultures to pick over. Colin had already made a few telephone calls to those whom Barry had counted on for support. He had been surprised and heartened that not one of them had challenged his credentials or interrogated him on the issues. Without exception, they had expressed their profound sorrow at the loss of Barry and their intense dislike of Howard Mollison, or "that great smug bastard," as one of the blunter voters had called him, trying to crowbar in his son. He could hardly stop himself grinning when he heard Barry was dead. Colin, who had compiled a list of pro-Fields talking points, had not needed to refer to the paper once. So far, his main appeal as a candidate seemed to be that he was Barry's friend and that he was not called Mollison. His miniature, black-and-white face was smiling at him out of the computer monitor. He had been sitting here all evening, trying to compose his election pamphlet, for which he had decided to use the same photograph as was featured on the Winterdown website. Full face, with a slightly anodyne grin, his forehead steep and shiny. The image had in its favour the fact that it had already been submitted to the public gaze and had not brought down ridicule or ruin upon him, a powerful recommendation. But beneath the photograph, where the personal information ought to have been, were only one or two tentative sentences. Colin had spent most